I am joined by our guest this morning. He's the head of the Tobago Business Chamber. And of course, you've seen him on the program before. This is Mr. Martin George, attorney at law. Good morning, sir.
Yeah, hi. Good morning to you, Sean, and good morning to all your viewers on WESN, the content capital.
Well, Mr. George, you are yourself, you're a very outspoken public figure, which we appreciate in the media. Better to have people talking than not talking. So that leads me into the first thing that I'd like to get your opinion on, because the THA seems to be quite tight-lipped over the controversy, I guess you could say, of the audio recordings. Now, we have technically not identified, we have not proven who the recordings are of. Assumptions are made by various different quarters of the island as well as the nation. From where you stand with the people who you've spoken to, both in your profession and as head of a business chamber, what do you make of this situation, and how bad really is it? Or is it not that bad at all?
Well, the thing is, Sean, it all depends on how we as Trinbagonians treat with it. Because, of course, we've had the hallowed words of former Prime Minister Basdeo Panday, who said politics has a morality of its own, which basically tends to suggest that, look, in politics, anything goes. But I think we as Trinbagonians have to be able to draw a line in the sand to say enough is enough. And, this is, basically you've crossed the Rubicon in this regard. And I am hoping that Tobagonians are able to lead and show the way in this regard. Tobagonians have been able to, be leaders in many other areas of industry and endeavor in Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm hoping that in this area of accountability in public affairs, accountability for public spending, accountability for, morals in politics, I am hoping that Tobagonians will let their voices be heard and demand that there be some kind of answers and explanations given. We saw the Express newspaper actually did an entire editorial on the issue, calling upon the leaders in the THA to come out and speak out on this issue. I, in my capacity as president of the Tobago Business Chamber, I have called on them to, come out and speak out on it, because it's something that needs to be addressed. And, we don't even need to go, basically with taking a flambeau to look in the night for what you have not even sought to find during the daytime. So when people start talking about the possibility of artificial intelligence or voice splicing or it being a bot call or robotic voice manipulation, hold on. How did we even get there when you basically have what sounds like two human voices, and you haven't heard from the two humans as to whether it's their voice or not? So in other words, they are the ones who need to first speak out on it and say, well, look, is it my voice? Is it not my voice? And then maybe they can then offer their explanations in the alternative. But, we really have, I think, missed the mark if we even begin to talk about artificial intelligence and these other things when the human beings in the, audio clip allegedly have not even addressed the issue or answered. And I mean, I think that, we, on shows like this, and that's why, Sean, I always make the time to attend and, participate, because I think your voice is a very powerful voice in the community. And, I try to play my part in whatever small way I can to raise these issues, to try to elevate the level of public discourse and conversation. Because, in Trinidad and Tobago, we were a land of humor, rumor, and bacchanal and old talk and mobelang. And that's fine. That's part of our culture, that's part of our nature. But sometimes there are issues which require sober, solemn, mature discussion and exposition. And I think that's the reason why we're having this topic, spoken about today.
Well, the silence that we're getting, one newspaper columnist, I believe, used the term "silence is golden," except and went on to say, well, in this case, not so much. I use the phrase "silence is deafening." I find rather it's very difficult to avoid the lack of communication on this issue, but this is something that seems to have been built up too, because we've heard various stakeholders say, well, you can't necessarily hear from them, the current executive administration anymore. The communication channels have become, less and less. Now, the minority party has been hammering home on some of these issues, and we'll get into some of the other ones later. But how true is this? Is it that the THA executive is now less and less willing to speak? And is it something to do about when you're in power, you just don't want to have to deal with the difficult questions from the public?
Well, I would think it would really come down to that because, when they're on the campaign trail and they're trying to get your votes, they're all over the media, they're all up in your face, all the time, coming to your door, knocking on your gate, coming and, begging and pleading for discussions with you to vote for them. And it seems that, once ensconced in the corridors and the bosom of power, they take a different view. I mean, we had a scenario where I think one of the secretaries, the Secretary for Health, made a very unfortunate comment about persons disturbing her or bothering her. And I mean, the reaction from the public was, "Hey, but wait, a couple months ago when you were disturbing us and bothering us to get our votes, you didn't have a problem. So now we're asking for assistance. How come it becomes bothering or bothersome to you?" And it comes back to the question of accountability. And the thing is, Sean, we in Trinidad and Tobago have to recognize that unless we are willing to step up and step forth and ask the difficult questions and probably seek to make the hard changes that are necessary, we would probably be doomed to be ruled by our inferiors. And history shows that. The Greek philosophers, they were very clear on that. They said, if you don't wish to, take the steps to try and change things, then you will be ruled by your inferiors. And it appears that that is what is happening here, in the sense that we have persons who have, aspired for office, they have gotten into office, and having gotten there, they seem to have drifted so far from their moorings. Remember the moral code that this party signed on to prior to coming into office, where they said, look, we are going to be different. We're going to set a different standard. And in fact, they said that, look, anyone who breaks this code will be dealt with swiftly and severely. What happened to that? Why aren't we calling upon them in that regard?
Well, exactly. It's an interesting phenomenon where slowly but surely, and one of our callers, he had to retract his criticism on me with regards to my criticisms on the THA executive, because I started to see them make similar mistakes to other politicians, political organizations, reverting back to that baseline average that they were supposed to be, moving us away from. Now, the opposition party in Tobago has been taking full advantage of this, and you can't blame them, right? You're watching the PNM now looking much better just because of a few mistakes from the THA executive. One of the things that the political leader of the Tobago Council, well, not one of the things, quite a few things, is the fact that certain promises made to the people of Tobago arguably has not really come to fruition. And I think it's been hinted that perhaps the work of the people of Tobago has been sidelined a bit with regards to some of these issues. I believe one public figure, I can't remember who we were speaking to at the time, but when the whole situation with the being independent and we have a new political party, it could have been Winford James. He questioned the fact that, look, you're there to be in the THA, not to be making new political parties. You're spending time on this political endeavor, this new beginning. Meanwhile, the people's business is kind of lamenting, in uncertainty as people are just waiting. So to what extent have the people been waiting for any sort of significant change? Because the new Well, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, what the project is, but I have said at least once or twice on this show that Tobago potentially has a traffic issue that will manifest itself coming from Crown Point, with that single lane. At some point, you no longer have the old road and the main road. You just have one road, and now I applaud them for making an effort, but their excuse is, well, the PNM did it this way, so we could do it this way. Like, I don't understand how this is supposed to be better.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point, Sean, And, I think that unfortunately, we are beginning to see in Tobago descent into the moral abyss, whereby, persons are willing to basically sell their souls for 30 pieces of silver. In other words, once they can line up and get their share at the gravy train or where they can eat at the trough, they are willing to actually zip their lips and remain silent on major issues and not speak out because they are getting their share of the spoils. And once we reach to that situation, then you are going to end up to a state of anarchy because, in other words, nothing goes, there's no more right or wrong. There's no, divided line to say, well, okay, this is the limit. We will not cross this line. It appears that they are willing basically to sell their souls once they are getting a piece of the pie.
Well, before we come to close, I do want to ask though, because I gave my opinion on the potential traffic issues on that part of Tobago, right? Yeah. As much as ironically Ansel Dennis, the Tobago Council political leader, says, well, that's not a big issue. I would like to say, well, hold on. The point is to prevent these things from becoming big issues, to then try to fix it. In the opinion of yourself and perhaps your members, the Storbay local Shervan Connector Road, is this a project, the implementation problems aside, is this a project that would have benefited Tobago if we see it to fruition?
Well, I mean, of course, anything that increases connectivity in that way would be something of benefit. But of course, we must always recognize that we are part of a twin island nation, a twin island state, and the EMA is the EMA for all of Trinidad and Tobago. So therefore, if the EMA has certain policies and requirements, then we must subscribe to them. If it is that there are areas of responsibility which under the 5th schedule of the THA Act are hived off to be under the mandate of the THA and there's no national policy, then fine, the THA can create its own policy. But if you have an organization such as the EMA and it has a national policy, then the case of Attorney General versus THA, where you had the judgment of Justice Nadia Kangaloo, that made it pellucid that the THA has to subscribe to whatever is the national policy. So Sean, I have to thank you very much for the time here, but I have another engagement that I have to rush off to. I mean, I'm sorry to, that we're not able to spend more time, but, it's always a pleasure chatting with you.
Well, thank you for that last remark there, educating me. I myself am not always aware of all the case law.
But I will send you a copy. It's a very interesting judgment, yes.
Well, thank you for that. That would be good. So, folks, that is, of course, Attorney at Law and President of the Tobago Business Chamber, Martin George. Again, we appreciate people who, like Mr. George, are willing to speak publicly, to put their opinions out there, to have that bravery that once people get into high office, that bravery seems to all of a sudden disappear, unfortunately.
Yes, because most people wish to line up, as I say, to feed at the gravy train.
Well, and the age-old issue that we have in politics, yes. This was supposed to be the start of something potentially different, and yes, we'll see how it goes.
Doesn't appear to be that.